lasts. Cy Cox.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. My grandkids know me as Popeye. Yeah, that's my grandpa name. Hopefully that comes out right every time. Thanks for having me here tonight. I really do appreciate it. I've really been looking forward to this. As many of you know, I'm not preaching full-time right now, and so I relish every opportunity, but it's especially wonderful when I get to preach and serve a congregation that I have a connection to. I really do appreciate it. I love the Stewart Church of Christ. I love all of you, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight, so thank you for being here. Tonight's message, Dear Younger Me, Work for What Lasts. And our two texts that this is based off of is Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10 through 12, and chapter 3, verse 9 through 14. I'm going to go ahead and read those before we get into the lesson. Ecclesiastes 9, 10 through 12 says, Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, which is the grave, to which you are going. Again, I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor the bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time. Like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. In chapter 3, verse 9 through 14 says, What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it, so that people fear before him. Have you ever thought about writing a letter to your younger self? The first and most obvious question in my mind when I read this was what would I say? And I can think of a lot of things that I would say. And honestly, it would probably all begin with, hey, bonehead. Huh? What are you thinking? Huh? How's that working out for you? That would probably come up quite often, actually, in a letter to my younger self. I think about that. If I could write my younger self, a letter, what wisdom would I want to impart to my younger self? What mistakes would I warn against? What truths would I wish that I had grasped sooner? And there's a long list of those things, and I found it, the timing of this lesson interesting because, Maria and I have 4 boys. And they're all 4 of them are a lot like younger me. Better, but a lot like younger me. Hey, bonehead. Yeah, you see, all 4 of them are just like that. I'll be turning 50 years old soon. I think I'm having my midlife crisis. I'm thinking about buying a sports car and stuff. I've been thinking about how even though 3 out of 4 of our boys are adults now and doing much, much better than I was at their age and have much more wisdom than I did, that's for sure. But I still have a lot to share with these younger versions of me because I keep learning more and more and growing in wisdom, hopefully, at least I think I am, but as I get older and gain more life experience and greater perspective and most importantly, continue to draw nearer to God. And at the same time that I'm thinking these things, like how can I continue to share these things with my grown-up children who are now, having their own kids, and how can I share these things with them? And then I get this year's topic. And so I start studying Ecclesiastes for this lesson. And the more I studied, and the more I dug in and understood the conclusions in the book, the more I recognized that the book of Ecclesiastes, in many ways, is just such a letter to my younger self, penned by a very wise, very experienced, and maybe even a little bit jaded preacher, as he's often called. Sometimes you'll hear him referred to as Kohelet, which is the Hebrew word there. Most often, I think, understood, and I think correctly, to be King Solomon, the wisest person there ever was. And he's reflecting on a life lived to its fullest, at least in terms of worldly pursuits, testing every worldly pursuit imaginable, and then sharing his ultimate conclusions for our benefit. And it really brings to an absolute pinpoint the very things that I would address most sharply with my younger self. Things like, what is it exactly that gives my life purpose? How do I extract meaning from this existence? What things should I be pursuing in this life? Of all the stuff in life that can be chased down, built, accomplished, conquered, what is it that I should be pursuing and focusing on and working for? And what is the point of it all? So let's dig in. Let's open up the Word of God, and we'll dive into this very profound, sometimes perplexing, and yet ultimately liberating wisdom of Ecclesiastes. This can be a difficult study. Thank you, Terry, for making Ecclesiastes the book for this year. This can be a difficult study because it really is loaded with good stuff, but it doesn't follow a typical sermon. You know, here's our introduction, and here's our 3 points, and here's our conclusion. It's scattered all throughout the book. It's not written how we expect things to be written to make a point in our modern day. So it can be a difficult study, but very rewarding. And we've got to wade through it all, work our way through all of it to get to those wonderful conclusions that really are very liberating. If we stop part way, we might stop with a very jaded and a very difficult view of life. But when we work all the way through, we see that, no, there's some wonderful answers in this. But he starts with this dramatic declaration that really sets the stage for this lesson, where in chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "Vanity of vanities. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity." He says, you know what? It's all empty. It's all useless pursuit. It's all chasing after the wind, as he says. That word vanity literally means vapor or breath, or like trying to grab a handful of smoke is kind of the idea there. Striving after wind. Anybody ever try to grab the wind? You can't get a hold of it, and that's the meaning behind that word. And so he's saying, I've observed all this life around me. And what does he see? He sees this relentless cycle that he says is vanity. He says in verse 4, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. In verse 5, the sun rises and the sun goes down. The wind blows and all streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. It just keeps going. Everything just has this cycle, and it just keeps going. Verse 9, what has been is what will be, and what has been is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. I mean, it kind of sounds exhausting when I think about that. It's just over and over, and it's all vanity, it's all emptiness. Makes me think of an old hamster on a wheel, running and running, but never getting anywhere, which is what I feel like most mornings. I get up and I go to the gym and I ride this exercise bike, and 30 minutes later it tells me I went 7 miles. But I promise you, during that entire time and at the end, I'm in the same spot the whole time. The only difference is that I'm really sweaty and my knees hurt, but I've gone nowhere, like that hamster on the wheel. And I think that's maybe the feeling that he had as he says it's all empty. Verse 8, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. It just keeps going on over and over and over, but it's empty. It never fills up. Pretty bleak view of life so far, but we don't want to stop there. So he decides that he's going to test everything himself. All right, this was the guy with more wisdom than anybody else has ever had. And he says, hey, if anyone can find the meaning in these pursuits, I'm going to give it a shot. And so he applied his mind to seek wisdom and knowledge, surpassing all who were before him in Jerusalem. But he found that in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And it was striving after wind. He tested pleasure and laughter, saying to himself, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But he quickly concluded, this also was vanity. Then he embarked on grand projects, and he amassed immense wealth, more than anybody else. He says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks. I made myself pools. I bought male and female servants. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers and many concubines, man's delight. He became great, surpassing everyone. He denied himself no pleasure. But after all that effort and acquisition, he considered all his hands had done and the work he had spent in doing it, and behold, guess what? All was vanity and striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Can you just feel the disappointment? All the work he put into all of this, and he ends up with just this sinking feeling that he's poured his heart and soul into something only to realize it was all unfulfilling. That's how Ecclesiastes starts out. This grand experiment of life lived apart from God, which inevitably leads to a sense of profound emptiness, like striving after the wind. I've often thought that if Solomon was so wise, why did he do all this stuff? Shouldn't he have known that it was all going to be empty? Shouldn't he have already known that it was all going to be vanity? I don't really know. I'm not sure of the answer to that, but I do think that his wisdom is really best on display as he digs deeper into why these pursuits lead to such emptiness and what it all means to us. And he identifies several sobering realities that make all worldly toil really kind of feel like a waste. And the first thing is the impermanence of everything that we achieve and acquire. I mean, it's not going to last forever, right? Our hard work, our great successes, our accumulated wealth, what happens to it? Chapter 2, verse 18, he says, I hated all my toil in which I had toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Imagine that, making your life's work building this empire only to have some clueless heir squander it or manage it poorly and lose it all. If you know the story of Solomon's son, you know that, well, it did go the wrong direction. That is what happened. And he says, this is all vanity and a great evil. The other thing is that riches can even if you do hold on to the riches, they can be kept by their owner to his own hurt. Or they can be lost in a bad venture just as easily. I mean, how many people become so attached to their possessions, their riches, their pursuits, their accomplishments, that they lose their friends, or their family, or their marriage, or even their hope of salvation? I mean, this happens all the time, unfortunately. It's a very, very sad story. How many people have you heard of who have lost fortunes in the blink of an eye? And it just devastated them. Have you ever looked up the facts on lottery winners? I mean, it almost never fails. Almost everyone who's ever won the lottery in our nation, 1 year later is actually in more debt and more broke and has less possessions than when they started. They lose it all in the blink of an eye. And then there's the insatiable nature of desire. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. That's in chapter 5, verse 10 and 11. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? It says it's like a treadmill. The faster it goes, the faster you've got to run. When goods increase, so do those who consume them. It's like having a great big giant pie, but the more pie you have, the more people show up wanting a slice. And your portion never truly feels any larger. And so he laments in chapter 6, verse 7, all the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. It's just never enough. We work, we consume, we work again, and we're still hungry. And maybe the most profound conclusion that he comes to concerning all this is the inevitability of death and forget. And this is a reoccurring theme all throughout the book. He notes that both the wise man and the fool face the same fate. Chapter 2, verses 13 through 16, he says some of these things. He says, "For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other." Just like all those animals out there, it's going to happen. He says, "There is no enduring remembrance, for all will have been long forgotten." And he says, "The dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, but the memory of them is lost." Our accomplishments, our work, our legacies, they fade. They fade, they are forgotten, they go away. They don't last forever. No matter how much we work, we shall go just as we came. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? We brought nothing into this world, and we're bringing nothing out, right? It's like that old rich man told his wife. He only had one wish when he passed away, saying, "Honey, I want to be buried with all of my money in my casket." Of course, the wife agreed without a second thought. And months went by, and eventually the man sadly did pass away. And at the funeral, his wife walked up to the casket with an envelope in her hand. And solemnly, she placed that envelope in the casket with her husband. Well, the preacher stood nearby and asked her about the envelope, and she said, "My husband's final wish was to be buried with all his money. I had to make sure it happened." Well, the preacher looked at that little envelope with a little confusion and said, "That guy was loaded. Your husband was rich. There's no way you fit that all in there." And she says, "Well, yeah, of course there was far too much money, so I did the courtesy of transferring it all in my account, and I wrote him a check." He's not taking that check with him either. We came in with nothing, and we're leaving with nothing. None of it is permanent. And then in the midst of all this, there's also our lack of control and understanding. We strive, we plan, we work hard, but time and chance happen to them all. Chapter 9, verse 12, he says, "For man does not know his time. Like fish which are taken in an evil net, and like birds which are caught in a snare, so the sons of men are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them." We have what we call the average life expectancy, and that's what we all hope for, and maybe even something beyond that. But none of those fish expect to be caught in that net. None of those birds expect to be caught in the snare. And that's the point that he's making, is there's always that possibility. And we've just got to face that fact. And we don't know what will be after us, nor can we find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. A lot of unknowns. Verse 13 of chapter 1, he says, "It's an unhappy business that God has given to the sons of men to be busy with." So the preacher looks at all his accomplishments, all his wisdom, all those pleasures, all the wealth that he amassed. And he saw that they really couldn't provide the lasting satisfaction he was seeking because of their impermanence, their inability to really, truly satisfy, the certainty of death, and ultimately our lack of control and knowledge. And so in chapter 3, verse 9, he says, "What gain has the worker from his toil?" He kind of says, what good is it? Now, if the book of Ecclesiastes just ended there with those thoughts, of course, that would be incredibly depressing. But that's not the final conclusion, thankfully, or this would be a really short lesson, and we'd be done, and we'd all leave here hanging our heads. But thankfully, we get some resolution to this problem of emptiness. Chapter 3, verse 12, he says, I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Well, this is already looking up. I like the sound of that. Also, that it is God's gift to man that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. He actually repeats that sentiment very often. In chapter 2, verse 24, he says, there is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. In chapter 5, verse 18, behold, what I have seen to be good and to be fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life which God has given him. For this is his lot. This enjoyment, this finding pleasure in our daily work and our simple blessings is a gift from God. From the beginning, we were made to work. If you think about Genesis chapter 2, where we get this close-up view of God creating mankind and his purpose for them, we read in chapter 2, verse 15 of Genesis, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. He looked at Adam and Eve and he said, be fruitful and multiply. We're to be good stewards of this world that he gave us. The idea is for us to be about our work. So the preacher divulges just a little bit more to this idea of enjoying our work and the simple blessings that God gives us when he says, we'll look at this first. It's not the pursuit of these things that's wrong. All these things that he pursued, it's not the pursuit of them that's wrong, but the expectation that pleasure or wealth or wisdom on their own are going to satisfy the deepest longings of the soul. If that's what we are expecting in our worldly pursuits, in the things that we work for, we're going to find out that we are sadly mistaken, because that will not fill that spot in our soul. It just won't. We're not made for it. But when these things are received from God's hand, they are a blessing. It's completely different then. So how does this all connect to our work, our toil, our purpose in life, the meaning of all this? Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10 introduces us to a kind of a pivotal idea here when he says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. That work from God, our toil, is a blessing from God. Do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. This is our chance to enjoy those blessings from God. And it's not a call to a frantic, workaholic kind of ambition for personal gain. It's a call to purposeful, vigorous engagement with life in the here and now, because life is short, and we are heading to where there is no more work or opportunity for those accomplishments. We have that blessing now. So it kind of redefines the purpose of hard work and the things that we work for. It's not about what we gain, because ultimately we're not taking it anywhere with us. It's more about how we live while we are here. He says God has put eternity into man's mind, even though we can't find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. We have eternity in our mind, even though we don't have the big picture that God has, but it's there. This deep longing for meaning and permanence that eternity is placed within us points beyond the vanity that we experience here in this life. That points to our Creator, a God who has made everything beautiful in its time. It's no wonder Jesus talks about laying up treasures in heaven, not here on earth. In Matthew 6:19, he says very plainly, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Keeps right on with what the preacher was saying in Ecclesiastes, that this stuff is impermanent. But there's stuff we can work for that lasts forever. Those treasures in heaven. I think about that poor young rich guy who came to Jesus and he says, what do I need to do to have eternal life? And Jesus says, keep the commandments. And the guy says, I've kept them all. I got this. And Jesus tells him, well, okay, if you would be perfect, go and sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And then come follow me. What was that guy's response? Unfortunately, it says that the young man heard this and he went away sorrowful because he had great possessions. He was caught up in the here and now. He had his eyes on something that was impermanent. He just didn't have the understanding of working for those things that last, which is what Jesus pointed to when he said, go help other people. It appears that this guy was looking to his stuff to satisfy the deepest longings of the soul, and they just won't. In 1 Timothy 6, verse 17 through 19, we read this. It says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provided us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. The uncertainty of riches versus certainty of God and storing up treasures in heaven. The ultimate conclusion of Ecclesiastes, the resolution to all this tension that he encountered when going on these worldly pursuits was in chapter 12, verse 13 and 14, the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. There's a lot. It's a simple statement, but there's a lot to unpack there. And he takes a lot of chapters and a lot of life experience to figure that out and to share it with us, but it is key for us. That purpose of hard work, and indeed all of life, isn't to accumulate wealth or achieve worldly success or to stack up accomplishments, though there's nothing inherently wrong with those things, but they're not an end to themselves. The real purpose is all about glorifying God. Now that is something that lasts forever and ever and ever. With or without us, God will be glorified. So that idea changes everything. This changes our perspective from a desperate, often exhausting, striving for worldly things to a joyful, grateful living through them for God. And this is where we gain that surprising liberation that comes from understanding life's true purpose, to having meaning to all of this that we strive for. We're no longer hamsters on a wheel running aimlessly. That exercise bike no longer gets the best of me every morning. Instead, we're invited to engage in our work and our daily life with zeal, knowing that our efforts, when offered to God, have eternal significance. It means embracing the simple blessings, our meals, our time together, finding enjoyment in our work, not as hedonistic pursuits, but as gifts from a loving God. And when we see our daily bread and the work of our hands as being from the hand of God, then ordinary moments become sacred. If we think about what Solomon did, the preacher, who tested everything and found that it wasn't the activity that was vain, but rather the purpose for which it was done. If the purpose is ultimately self-gratification, accumulation, or an attempt to find ultimate meaning apart from God, it will always lead to emptiness. But if the purpose is to live faithfully, to work diligently, to enjoy graciously, all as a response to God's gifts and in obedience to his commands, then life takes on a much, much deeper meaning. And this all frees us from the pressure of control. He says, we can't straighten what God has made crooked. We have no control over that. We can't fully know or understand God's work. And that's not in our control, and it doesn't need to be. Time and chance do happen to all, but that's for God to worry about. We can live in a way that honors God with our efforts, with our work, and with our enjoyment, trusting him with the outcomes. So what does that mean for us, practically speaking? What is that good thing that we get to carry into our week? Well, if we were to write a letter to our younger selves, guided by the wisdom we find in Ecclesiastes, maybe it would say things like, "Dear younger me, that project, that task, that mundane chore, whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. Not because it will make you rich or famous or grant you eternal legacy here on earth, but because it's an opportunity to exercise the gifts God has given you. And every honest effort can be an act of service to God. Hard work does have value, but not merely for worldly success, but for the glorification of our God. Embrace simple joys as God's gifts. Don't overlook the beauty in the ordinary. That meal, that conversation, that moment of quiet rest. These are God's gift to man. Stop chasing the next big thing, the next distraction, the next possession, and learn to find enjoyment and pleasure in that work and in the simple blessings of everyday life. It's not about laziness, it's about gratitude. And remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. Don't wait until life's twilight to realize what truly matters. Don't miss out on all those opportunities to enjoy those blessings. Life is fleeting. There's a judgment to come. Ultimately, the only thing that lasts is our relationship with God and our obedience to his word. As the preacher concluded, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So all in all, the book of Ecclesiastes, this letter from an older, wiser, much wiser than me, constantly reminds us of the futility of pursuing fulfillment apart from God. And it calls us to reevaluate our definition of gain. It urges us to work hard, yes, but not to chase the wind of worldly vanity. Instead, let us work with might, enjoy with gratitude, and live with purpose, recognizing that our labor is truly meaningful when its ultimate aim is to glorify the one who gives us breath and life and every good gift. So all of us, whether young or old or having a midlife crisis, can gain great satisfaction and joy from life when we listen to this ancient wisdom and strive to work for that which lasts. Thank you.